Hello everyone, welcome to my channel. My name is Samantha and I am a person who likes to read. So here on this channel, I like to make videos about books that I've read recently. And today we will be discussing Katabasis by R.F. Kuang. This is her most recent novel and I have the beautiful like deluxe edition or whatever it is. I don't even know what you would call it. It has the sprayed edges on it and this amazing cover with it, and the inside jacket is really pretty, and apparently it's signed, I think. So I have an awesome edition that I got from my local indie bookstore, so that's great. And today I'm going to be talking about it. I want to talk about the book itself, but I also want to talk about some of the discourse that I've been seeing online about R.F. Kuang's writing and about her books and how people view them as being like too academic or too technical, I guess, and my thoughts on that and why it's confusing to me why people think that. But that is going to be what I'm talking about today. It's been a minute since I posted a video because I am in grad school and I have just been very busy in the last summer semester that I was doing, and then I'm in my final semester now getting my master's degree. So I am focusing on schoolwork first, but I really liked this book and that's why I wanted to talk about it today. And I just want to jump right into it. So I gave this book a 4 stars, and if you don't know any R.F. Kuang books or you don't know what this one's about, I would recommend getting into her novels if you are someone who is an academic or who likes reading dark academia, who likes books that have commentary on social issues, specifically like racism within academia and things like that. Or like double standards within academia. I have read 2 of her novels prior to this one. I read Yellowface and Babel, and I really liked Yellowface, and I liked Babel even more, and I liked that it's commentary on how you can't have some sort of social change or revolution without violence, and it was just really good. I really liked that story. And so that's why I was really excited to pick this one up, especially after I heard the synopsis of this one. This book is about 2 PhD students who are getting their PhD in analytic magic at Cambridge, I think. Let me make sure I get this right because I know people in the UK probably don't like when people confuse Cambridge or Oxford. So they're at Cambridge, and that's where they're going to get their PhDs. And one day, the main character, Alice, accidentally kills her professor and her advisor, who is apparently a terrible jackass. So she accidentally kills him and they have to go to hell. So she kills him on accident, and one of her peers, her classmates, follows her to go to hell to retrieve his soul so that he can still give them good letters of recommendation and help them get jobs, because this is set in the 1980s. And so I guess back then, especially for women in academia, maybe then it was a little bit harder to find positions without strong people who have already been in that space to advocate for you. So she wanted to go to hell to get him. And the inspiration, or some of the, I guess, yeah, like inspiration for this book that R.F. Kuang mentioned was Dante's Inferno, which has like the 8 circles of hell, and that character in that story goes through hell. And so that's kind of what this is like based on, I guess. Not even based on it, but it's similar to that concept. And then Alice in Wonderland was also another inspiration that she had for this story. So someone falling through the rabbit hole and going into this entirely different world. So that is what this book is about, and it really intrigued me when I heard about this book being released, and I knew I wanted to read it because I had already read 2 of her other books that I really enjoyed, and this one sounded more up my alley of something that I would really like, and I ended up giving it 4 stars. And the reason I didn't give it 5 stars was the pacing a little bit. This book is almost 600 pages, at least the edition I have, so it's almost 600 pages, and there were times where it dragged out a little bit for me. So that is really the only reason I didn't give it a full 5 stars, was just some of the pacing. That was really it. Everything else I really liked. I liked the characters. Everything felt really expanded and real, and you're going into hell. And so that's something that you have to really expand on and write about. And there's also a magic in this book, and studying like analytic magic, which is something I don't know a lot about. And even reading the book, I was still able to understand that. So I thought it was really well thought out. R.F. Kuang always does a lot of research, I think, for her books, and you can tell that through reading it. Like, it wasn't as if she didn't know what she was talking about. So it was easy to follow because she explained it so well. And so I thought the concept of the book was really unique, and it was really well written and expansive, and the world was immersive. And the only problem I had personally was some of that pacing a little bit throughout the story. So at this point, I am going to get into spoilers. So if you haven't read it for any reason and you don't want to continue watching, if you don't want to be spoiled, don't continue watching from this point on. But I want to talk a little bit more in depth about why I didn't like some of the pacing and some of the things that I didn't like. So at the very end of the book, essentially, okay, the reason I also I'm looping this into pacing problems, but Jacob Grimes was the professor, and he was like this huge figure within the story throughout the entire book. And we got glimpses of who he was as a person through Alice's point of view, and then later through Peter's point of view from their perspectives as students. We never got to meet Jacob Grimes until the very, very end, and we finally meet his soul, because the whole point of them going into hell was to find him, and we really didn't get to that point until the very, very end. So that part felt a little anticlimactic to me, because it felt like the mission of the story changed a little bit. Like, even more than halfway through, I was like, okay, are we never gonna find him? Like, what is the point of the story if they never find him? And like, what do we go from here, if they don't? So that's kind of the part where I was hung up a little bit on, because I think I was holding on too much to, that's like the point of the story, was for them to go find him in hell. But really it ended up being more about going into hell and facing your own mortality and facing, who you are as a person, and who do you want to be when you go back into the world. Because after being in hell and you think that life isn't worth living, especially for Alice, I think she had a lot of issues that she had to deal with. And for her, like, going back up into the real world, she was like, I don't want to spend any more time moping around in bed and being depressed and like being so caught up in things that I don't think even matter anymore, especially her program and having all this pressure that she put on herself. And so I think that was more like the point of the story, rather than them finding this character and getting him back up to the surface and all of this. So that was one of the reasons I didn't like it as much. In addition to that, one of the other portions that I thought was dragged out just a little bit was the very end, where they get to that city of people who were essentially like didn't want to die, I guess, or they were in hell, but they didn't want to reincarnate, or they didn't want to fully go through the leaf, or they couldn't pass on. So they became bushes and trees, and they were just sitting there, and they were going to sit there for the rest of time until hopefully one day something maybe changes, even though the rules of hell says that, or the rules of the universe says that hell will always exist. But for them, they held out hope that one day it would change, and then maybe they didn't have to be there for forever. And I liked that philosophy of the story, and I thought that was very interesting in the way she brought that up, like pointing out that yes, we have these laws of the universe, but what actually is the proof that that will actually stay the same for the rest of time? Because what we know about the universe is that it is constantly changing, constantly expanding. And if that's true, then how do we know that these laws will stay the same forever? And so in hell, we can apply the same logic. So I really liked that part of it. But the actual, like, her staying in that little city and seeing everything and meeting the bushes and snapping the bush, that was just too dragged out to me. I get the point, but there were some parts where I was like, okay, come on, especially at the end. At that point, we still had not found Jacob, and I was like, what is going on? Like, what is the point of this? So those were my only two gripes where the pacing felt a little off. I did enjoy how the timeline jumped back and forth. Like, we would see moments of them in hell, like chapters of them together in hell, and then we would see chapters of them as students, how they met. We also got to see Peter's background a little bit, and a little bit from his point of view. Like a chapter was from his point of view and he explained a little bit more of his background, and I actually like to see how he battled Crohn's disease. And I guess back then in the 1980s, there wasn't as much known about it or how to treat it or how to live with it a little better than he could. So he had these spouts where he couldn't get out of bed, or he was hospitalized, he had to have surgery, and he didn't want anyone to use that against him in his academic space, and he didn't want anyone to think that that was a handicap for him, basically, or that it was a disability. So I really like seeing that point of view from him, and I thought it was really interesting. I feel like I don't read a lot of books that have characters that deal with diseases or disabilities or things like that may, make them like have some hurdles that they have to overcome in their story. So I really enjoyed that point of view because I just don't see that often in fiction books that I read. So I really appreciated that, and I thought it added a lot to Peter's character. And whenever Peter died also in the book, I was like, there's no way that he's actually dead, because it just felt too abrupt to me. And I was like, it just felt so rushed past too, like nonchalant. And I just thought that it seemed too, like, I don't know, it didn't seem real to me. I was like, he's gonna come back in some way. There's no way he's dead. I thought maybe he wasn't actually dead, but he ended up dying and then she brought him back. So I liked that they ended up together too, and that it was somewhat of a love story in there. So overall, those were the pacing issues I had, but everything else I thought was so good. Even the academic part of it, like explaining logic and explaining these math formulas that explain logic, and as I mentioned earlier, talking about the rules of the universe or the laws of the universe and how it may change. And I just thought it was so good. I personally enjoyed that, and that's going to be my segue into the online discourse about R.F. Kuang's writing. Apparently it's too academic and it's too hard for people to understand, and apparently she is too obvious, or she writes it out to where it's like too easy to interpret, and I don't understand why that's an issue for people. If you don't like the genre that she writes in, maybe it's just not for you, or maybe that's just not something you write or that you like to read. And I think it also has a lot to do with people having this feeling of, I need to have an opinion on every single thing that I see on the internet. So for example, R.F. Kuang is a very popular author. Her books are very popular because she's an amazing writer and she tells amazing stories. And I think people see that and they're like, well, if she's popular, that must mean I have to have an opinion on it. You don't have to have an opinion on it, especially if it's not something that you wouldn't necessarily like to read. I think that the Fourth Wing books are very, very popular. It was like one of the best-selling books probably of the last few years. I have never read those. I don't have a desire to read them because I don't necessarily read that type of fantasy a lot, but I don't have any opinion on them because I don't know anything about them, and that's the thing. You're reading this book and claiming it's a textbook. I don't understand that. I don't see that. I don't get that. Maybe from Babel, I guess you may say that, because there are footnotes in that book, and it's a lot about language and having to explain language in that book. But R.F. Kuang doesn't write academic stories. She writes fiction. They're not nonfiction. And just because she has a caliber of story that she wants to tell doesn't mean that it is too academic or too analytical. I just think that people this isn't the writing that may be for you, or that's not something that you want to write or want to read. I read some books by certain authors and I don't necessarily like their writing style, so I'm not going to read them again because I know I don't like it, or I just didn't like the story. It's because of the writing wasn't for me. That doesn't make the author a bad writer. It doesn't make it a bad story. It just makes it not for me. So I don't understand why there's this whole discourse about her writing and about how people don't like it. I think that not everyone has to have an opinion on it. So especially if you don't like it, if you don't have anything nice to say, you don't really have to say it at all. I read a lot of books and some of them I don't like. I don't really make videos about books I don't like. I like to make videos about books that I really loved and that I want to talk about and hear more about on the internet. So that is what I have to say on that. Overall, again, I gave this book 4 out of 5 stars, and I really would love to hear what people have to say about it in the comments, because again, this one was, I feel like, divisive in terms of people online were really excited to read it, or they were really excited to get the arc, and then they were very disappointed by the story. And I personally really enjoyed it, so I'd love to hear what people have to say and what your thoughts are on that, and what your thoughts are on R.F. Kuang's writing, and what you think about the discourse around her as a writer. Personally, I really love her as a writer, so I'll continue to read her books because I personally like them. I think I'm the target demographic, target audience for her writing, and I think they're very good. So let me know what you all think, and thank you all for watching this video, and I'll see you all in the next one. Bye.